we went from 5 employees at the beginning of 2021 to ending 2021 with 18.
What is up, everyone? Joe Everest, the fence expert, joined by Caleb Roth of Standstill Experts. Caleb, we just got done actually recording the interview they're getting ready to watch. We talked about your story. We talked about staying in university. We talked about luck versus hard work. I think they're really going to enjoy the story. What do you think?
I hope so, man. I enjoy telling it, and I think it maybe a twist folks don't expect, when you see what we do. So I appreciate you having me.
And the interesting thing is, I think we uncover a little bit of the why behind staying in university.
Yeah, it makes sense, right?
Without further ado, here we go.
Let's go.
Caleb, I really appreciate you being so generous with your time. If you don't mind sharing with us your staying story.
All right, Joe, thanks. I appreciate it. So my staying story actually starts with my fence story. It starts before it goes back a little further. So I grew up in Middle Tennessee, and my family had a fence business, and still in business today. But we had a fence business, and from the time I was a little kid, Dad had a fence company. It was the way things were. That's what dads did, right? So, as a small kid, I don't remember much about it other than just I got to go with my dad in the truck, and there were always workers at our house. And Dad worked a lot. I guess he worked 7 days a week sometimes, and sometimes there was probably no work. Maybe there was feast or famine. Dad could fix anything. And he always made me come work with him, hold the flashlight, and I've still got PTSD from holding the flashlight. And but anyways, I remember from the youngest age having the pipe rack behind the garage, behind the house, and just the different fence supplies and materials, and but I didn't pay much attention to it. And much like you, I guess at some point in time, I had to go to work with Dad. I mean, I remember as a little kid going and being expected, maybe to pick up something and carry it. But there was a certain age, and I don't remember exactly when it was, maybe 9 or 10. But there was a certain age when you were expected to work like a man.
Sure.
Right? And so that big stack of boards is going to go over there. and every post needs a bag of concrete, and clean out all these holes. The hogger dug them all out. The same old jobs. And or carry the jackhammer over here and roll the hoses, and I remember hating it because it was hard and it was not fun. But I also remember feeling proud and accomplished. Like, what, I worked hard today. Especially, they had the same problems then that we do now. It's hard to find good help.
Sure.
And so many times I remember I was taught how to do the work, and I don't think I was an exceptional worker, but I knew what to do, and I knew how to work, and I knew my dad would whip me if I didn't work hard enough, or at least get mad and yell at me or something, or throw something. So I was always trying to be productive. But I do remember when being a pretty young boy, when I would outwork the men that were working for my dad. Not all of them, but there were some that you would outwork them, and I remember that made me feel proud. Yeah. I was like, yes, sir, I'll outwork him. So. And but that's it. Just grew up building fences, and just that was a part of my life. It was normal. You can tell I'm really going down memory lane here a little bit.
Yeah.
So anyways, that was the fence business, man. Just grew up. I remember so many different guys, man. My dad did everything. I remember one story. This made me so mad, but my dad would get workers, and how sometimes this can happen, and they didn't have a car or something. I remember I bought my first truck, and my dad, I come home from school one day. I couldn't drive yet, but I had my truck. It was mine. Didn't have the driver's license yet. And he was like, yeah, Chris took your car home. I let him borrow it so he could get back and forth to work. And I was just distraught about that. I'll never forget that. But yeah, that was kind of it. Just people coming and going, and we had some people that were always there, but there was always people coming and going in the fence trade because it was hard. The ground's hard in Tennessee, rock, and that was it. But speaking of rock, I'll bring that up later on into my story, because that's part of why I no longer build fence. So when I turned, so went through school, and I didn't know what I was going to be when I grew up. I had no idea. I still don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up. And I remember I got out of school, went to college for a little while, and at some point, right after high school, I told my dad I was going to go to work for him. I'm ready to go to work for you. And he said, nope, you're going to go get a job for somebody else before you work for me. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. I didn't know. So I went to work for a guy named Tommy Davis, who was they called him Booger. He was sort of in our town. He was one of the last original, they called him tin bangers. He made commercial grade ductwork out of sheet metal.
Okay.
He had the big metal brakes. He could make what was called a squared around by hand. They do it all by machine now. And so we made custom metal ductwork, cut it out, and then we would go install it. And this is the big ductwork that you could walk inside of,
Nice.
you know. And we would go in big commercial buildings and lifts and hang it up way up in the air, and you know, just did that stuff. And that was a lot of fun. He was about 140 pounds and about 60 years old and 150 miles an hour.
Really?
Yeah, like we're up early, we're working hard all day long, and there was no quit. And I think he's 115 years old now and still working.
Still going?
Yeah, just wide open, that kind of guy. I worked for him for, I guess, a year, and then I came back and for whatever reason started with the family business. And so we've got a town outside of Nashville called Brentwood. And I remember they were going to let me run an estimate. My dad was a spreadsheet guru, so he had spreadsheets with all the pricing up to date. And, you know, he could push in one button, it would change the whole sheet.
Yeah.
Cutting edge technology back in the time. This must have been around 2006. And so I had my book. I was going to be a salesman. And so I had my polo shirt on. I had my book, my rolling wheel. And I was in one of the company trucks, and I was going to run this estimate. I had my first estimate, and it was in Brentmead Road. And so I called the lady. I've already turned out on the road, and I kind of pulled over to call her. I'm coming to see you, whatever her name was. And she said, and I said, so you're down by Brentwood, right? And she said, oh no, I'm in Murfreesboro, which is another suburb outside of Nashville on a totally different direction. And so I remember that stood out to me, and I said, well, I never thought that, you know, that was there. So I turned around, went the other way, went to this lady's house. It's just this little old lady. She probably in her 60s or 70s, widow, and had a nice ranch home in a neighborhood. And she looked through all my pictures, you know, back when we had pictures in a folder that were in the sleeve, you know, of actual fences that we had built. And so she said, well, the one I want's got lattice on top of it. I want lattice, but I want square lattice. Not this kind you get at Home Depot. I want
not
this
the diagonal.
stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's not in my price book. I didn't know what to do. So I called my dad, and he was like, that's not in the book. It was in the book next week. But he sat down and figured it all up, and he said, okay, and I'll never forget, it was $19.50 a foot, $19.50 a foot for cap and trim, post cap, 6x6 post, square lattice, all this stuff. And I remember I wrote it right on the top, lattice top, $19.50 a foot. And then I had the 3 sheets, and so I filled out my estimate, and I drew everything up nice and neat. And I had no clue what I was talking about. I was just taking an order, right? So I go and I turn this bid into the lady, and my dad's thinking he's never going to sell this. It's the most expensive fence you can get in Tennessee right now, you know. And she said, okay, where do I sign? She signed the paperwork, wrote a check for half the money, and then sent me on my way. And I thought, this is easy. This is the easiest job ever. And so I went home, and that was it. I sold my first fence job. And then I think like that may have been like a Friday, and then Monday my dad was like, all right, son, I'm going to be taking some time off. It's your business now. I want you to take care of it. And you know what to do. You know, make sure the crews show up on time, and make sure, you know, you bid the jobs according to the book. And my mom was in the business too, so she was answering the phones and doing the books and stuff. And so I was like, okay. So that was it, you know. And that was kind of my fence story right there. That was it for probably the next 10 years. Was fence business, running the family fence business. And somewhere along the way, I guess I struggled. Not, we hovered right under the $1 million mark every year for years, and it was good. But we had a lot of struggles, the same struggles everybody else has. But the struggle for me was not the struggles we were having. It was the struggle of not knowing where to turn to get advice, not knowing what to do. There was no network of. They were out there, I'm sure, but we just didn't know where they were.
Didn't know how to access it.
We didn't have the people to help us. And business advice from an accountant is not always relevant to a fence contractor. Running 1 or 2 crews. And so, I just remember that was a really big pain for me in my life. Was I don't know what to do. I know there's a better way, but I don't know where to turn. I don't know what to do, and I don't even know what I don't know. And that was a thing. So, and what it came down to me at the time, what I thought it meant was money, because I wanted to make more money, and I made 3%. That was what I made. I made 3%. No benefits, no insurance, no nothing. Running the family fence business for 3%. And that's a bad deal, man. Yeah, I got a bad deal. But I had a house, I had cars, I had a family. It was no big deal. And so that was that. And then, so here's where the story twists, I guess, is one day, I guess in the end of 2011 or 12, a voice came into my, late at night, just a voice came to me, and I knew I was going to go stain fences. I've never done it before. Never thought about it before, and it was just, I knew I'm going to stain fences, and it's going to change my life. It's going to be the best thing ever. You know how you get fired up with some stuff, and I was like, why didn't I see this all along? This is it. And so I remember it was December, when I left, it was December 5th, but I decided I was going to go to Texas and learn to stain. And so I think we had like $500 in our bank account, and 1 kid at home, and I was like, I'm going to go to Texas and learn how to stain. And my wife thought I was crazy, and off I went, and came back and still kept running the fence business. My dad was actually a partner with me, because of course when I had this bright idea of striking out on my own, my dad's like, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to be your partner in this. So that didn't last for very long. He couldn't deal with the fear of overspray. It was just too much for him to take. But anyways, so came back, and I kept running the family business, and I started staining, but I used a different company name. So I called myself Central Tennessee Fence Staining back then, because I thought, well, that's a really good, powerful name for Google, because people search stainers in Central Tennessee.
Makes sense.
That's a very powerful Google name. I was very marketing minded, as you can see. Very
from the beginning.
Yeah. So I was doing that, and so growing up in the fence business, I knew all the fencers. I knew all of them, and they all knew my dad. And so I just called all of them and said, hey, I want to stain your fences. And I just started wearing them out, just calling them all the time, and eventually started getting a pretty good book of business staining. And I was doing it on the weekends, doing it at night, doing it whenever I could. And I think I threatened to leave the fence company for a couple years. And my dad would say, just stay till June. Just stay till June, I'll be good to go. And I remember that went on, and finally went out on my own, and started staining full time. And that was when my life started to change, because I got cash flow in my life. But I didn't know what cash flow was or how to use it or whatever. I just thought I was rich. But so started staining, started making money, and I was doing it all on my own, owner operator, and I would have a helper. Sometimes my wife would come and help, and but mainly it was on my own, and I really remember really enjoying it. I was never a really good stainer, because I couldn't cut a straight line. But I didn't care about it. I just knew if I get it on the house, I'll just clean it off.
Just clean it off, yeah.
In worst case, I'll paint the dang house, or whatever. It's like, I didn't worry about it. If it got on a car, we'll just wash the car, So I was pretty blinded to fear. I wasn't afraid of messing something up. So that helped me, because that's a problem for a lot of stainers. So stained, and so I started thinking, man, you know what? I've got to figure this business thing out, how to stain and how to really have a successful staining business. I'm going to call guys who've been staining for a long time and who know what they're doing, and I'm just going to interview them, ask them some questions. And so I did that, and basically I was talking to the guy I was buying stain from and saying, who's the biggest fish you got, man? And I would call them, and they'd say, this guy does $1 million a year in staining, and I'd call him up, and they go, this is my second year. I only did 30 grand this year. What are you talking about? And I was like, all right, check that guy off the list. And it kept going and going. And what I found was I didn't, most of those conversations ended up and they were asking me questions. And I thought, this isn't right. And it was really uncomfortable for me because I had like an imposter syndrome kind of a thing. I remember I called Jeff Coat Fence Company, and a lady, I talked with a lady there, and I was calling to interview her because they'd been staining a lot of fences. They're in Mississippi, Tony Thornton's place. Yeah. And I remember the phone call ended with, they were asking me a lot of questions about staining. And I thought, well, that's really weird. And I thought, well, maybe I should do a podcast, you know?
Yeah.
And that's where the podcast thing came from. But I'll never forget, I got to give a lot of credit to a guy named Doug Harrell from Harold's Fence Painting in Kentucky. I wanted to learn how to paint fences because we got a lot of black horse fences where we are. And I called Doug, and he was really the first guy to just say, you know what, I'm going to help you. And he literally spent hours on the phone with me, telling me how to bid the job, how to set our truck up, how to not burn your truck down, what paint to buy, what paint not to buy. And he made it where we could spray 1,000 foot of fence an hour with doing fence painting, and we would have never figured that out without that guy. But when Doug helped me, he took my learning curve to zero. I got 20 years of experience, and not just regular experience, a guy who was doing it at a high level. Yeah, like miles and miles of fence a week that these guys were doing. And I thought, you know what, that guy he made me a lot of money, obviously. Sure. But he cut my learning curve way down, and he talked about the money, and he talked about how he was investing, and how I think he owned he bought like a couple small hotels, and and I'm thinking, how did this guy who paints fences for a living afford this stuff? And then I just messed with him and networked with him for a few years, but he's the one that really got me thinking, I need to be calling older guys. Yeah. I really need to take this more seriously, because that had paid off. And so I've just spent, the last couple years, since then, just trying to do that over and over and over again, surrounding myself with those kind of people. And so somewhere along the way of this stain story, I had some issues that I couldn't figure out with the stain we were using, and we started, basically, a long story short was, if I'm going to spend a bunch of money on a bad stain, I'll just make my own bad stain. That's what I told everybody. Is like, how hard can it be? We're going to just make our own stain. And so we started making stain. My idea was that as a service business, so by this point, I had changed the name to Stain and Seal Experts. Okay. And I remember that was another one of those things that just came to me in the middle of the night, and I was like, that's it. And so at some point along the way, I decided I'm going to make my own stain, and we're going to brand it to our company so people think we're really serious about this service business. We're going to have our own name on the bucket, There you go. And never thought about selling stain. It was never in the equation. Really? So never ever was going to sell any stain, and just started making it, trying to save a buck, and trying to have a little bit of control over what I was doing. And there were things I didn't like about other stains. I thought, well, I'll just make mine to not be that way. I'll just make it the way I want. And that's what we did, and just kept growing the service business. And I guess by this point, I'm probably mostly out of the field, working in more of a supervisory role, owner-operator, but not doing most of the work. And I don't know how it happened, but at some point along the way, somebody wanted to try the stain we were making. Because I think the main reason was because I was a real loudmouth, kind of like I still am today, meaning I was always on social media. Sure. Because the only way I could, I couldn't afford, or at least I didn't see in my mind that I could afford real advertising. So I had to do what I could afford, which was social media, Facebook Live, or at that time it wasn't. They don't even have Facebook Live. It was, you made a video. Yeah, and posted the video. and it was so funny because I would have, my nice hat or no hat, whatever, nice polo shirt. And I would say, this is Caleb with Central Tennessee Fence Staining or Stain and Seal Experts. The crew's getting their stuff unloaded. They're about to stain this fence, and I just wanted to show it to you. While they do the work, I'm going to go do some other things, but I'll be back when we're done, and I'll show you how the crew did it. And then I'd turn it off. I'd take my clothes off. I'd put on a suit. I'd stain the fence, and then I would get the camera back out when the job was completely done, and I've got like stain wiped off of my face. I'm wearing a hat because my hair was all messed up. I don't even look like the same person. I'd say, well, the guys are done. They're headed off to the next job site, but let's check this one out. And I would show the fence, and that was me. And I just did that every single job. I did that, and it made my phone ring. And so that's what I did. And I think that's why people were like, hey, what are you using? And I was like, well, we made it. Can we try it? And then that happened. So then we started selling stain and doing the service. And somewhere along the way, got to give credit to everybody who had a hand in it. It just seems like a flash. Now we're selling, that's our main business, is selling stain to people. But I think through it all, we've kind of, so when I really sit there and figure out what my why is with the business today, if I say why, go down the chart, and see what the why is. What I figured out was growing up when the fence business was mine, I had a lot of pain, and in it from the not knowing what to do, not knowing what I didn't know. It caused my family, it caused a lot of pain in the family. My parents got divorced. Probably a whole lot of it had to do with the fence business. Just wasn't, most people would look at it and say, oh, it was very successful. But it wasn't what it could have been with proper guidance and direction. And that was a really big pain for me. And I remember an easy way to put it that a lot of people can make sense of, when I started staining and I started figuring a few things out, my wife got to come home from work.
Yeah.
She got to stay at home with the kids, which is what she always wanted to do, And, other things in life got better, but that was a big one. That was a dream for us because we wanted to homeschool our kids, and now we have 4 kids and we homeschool them.
Sure.
And so kind of what my mission or what our why as a company is we want to figure out all that crap we didn't know how to do before. We want to figure it out, and it's anything from the financial stuff, the employees, how to keep employees happy, how to keep company culture happy, any problem I have in my business, I want to figure it out, and then I want to share it, and that's kind of become my passion. It's like, how can I help other people grow? Because it was just such a big pain for me. And I knew that if I didn't figure it out, it would probably lead me to a divorce, because I'd be working 7 days a week, never having any money, and I didn't want to go down that path. So I'm trying to figure it out so that we can just pass it on to the next person. And we sell stain. We still stain in Nashville, but the mission is really just to help others not go through the same crap that we went through. And that's sort of, here we are today at Fence Tech in 2022, and that's my fence story.
So Caleb, let's talk a little bit about Staining University, because I think what I heard throughout that story was frustration because you couldn't find whether the networking resources or just the educational resources. So let's talk a little bit about what Staining University is, and then probably tie it back into that story.
Yeah, so Staining University is, I find people that I look up to or I respect in business, and usually they have a helping attitude. They want to help others. And so I say, hey, would you like to come and speak to some people about what you do, and maybe help them with whatever they're good at. It's like with Joe, I say, hey, come talk to us about video.
Sure. With
our good friend Matt Warner, it's like, hey, you've got a great culture. When you go to his company, like if you drop $1, 5 people run over and pick it up and say, you dropped this. It's not something you can tell at first. If you're not used to it, you go, oh, this is
Yeah.
They're going to get in trouble if they don't.
It's
Then
just
you
because
realize,
I'm here.
Yeah, and then you realize, oh, wait a minute, no, this is the way they are. So I say, hey, Matt, why don't you come talk to us about culture?
Yeah.
And the list goes on and on. You know, we find
Sure.
guys who are really good in the field at the craftsmanship of staining or
Yeah.
of fence building. Then we find people who are good at marketing, people who
Yeah.
can help you with, you know, what is a P&L, you know,
Yeah.
whatever. Just
Yeah.
the things that you that if you don't know, you don't know. And
Yeah.
so we just try to get everybody under one roof. And we feel like if maybe you're really good at video marketing, but this other guy, so you're coming to speak, maybe this other guy is really good at something you're not.
Yeah.
And then everybody can bring that knowledge together. And then it just really molds together with all the people who come to visit and participate in it that aren't instructors, because I think all the instructors pick up stuff from them. It's a really weird dynamic that I wouldn't have expected to happen.
Yeah, I agree with that, Caleb. That, you know, one of the things is something that I incredibly enjoy. You know, so I appreciate you letting me be a part of that. But I agree with that sentiment that the teachers also become the students.
Right.
Right. So we also sit in on each other's trainings or classes, and we can learn just as much as the people, the other people that are attending university. I think what you're doing, after hearing the story, I think what you're doing is you're building the school and the network that you wish you had had in the beginning.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I think that's a pretty fair assessment of it. Yeah.
Now let's also talk about the fact that it's free.
Yeah.
You know, I mean I think that's a.
I'll tell you why it's free, because I'm a marketing guy, and obviously I like to do marketing. I enjoy
Sure.
it. And so our keynote speaker this year, Jacob Salem. I'll tell you a quick story about him. I met him at a Zig Ziglar event.
Okay.
He was a speaker. He was Zig Ziglar's social media guy, and he's a master at online courses. Like he made like people with big names. He would make their online course for them, and they would sell millions of dollars of online courses. And he said, look, the staining that you do is very valuable, and you should turn it into an online course. And I was like, yeah, we're going to do it. So I built the website, staininguniversity.com, with plans of turning that into a course portal, and trying to figure out what to charge. There was a lot of other people, the Wizard of Wood and other people were doing online, they were doing paid courses for wood and staining and stuff. And I struggled with it so much. You know, everybody's begging me to train them, and I'm thinking, well, I don't know that much. I just know how to do the basic stuff, and it works, and we run our business based off of that model. And I worried about it, and people are, you know, social media, they're beating the doors down about, yeah, we want courses, we want to learn this. And finally, one day I just said, it's free. And when I made that decision that it was free, it was like the weight of the world came off my shoulders, because it gave me complete freedom to do whatever I want. It's free. If you don't like it, it's free.
It was free.
You know? And so I thought, well, how can we make that grow? And I guess I didn't think about how could we make it grow. I guess we just went with it. It's free. I don't know why it's free. I know it costs money to do a class. I know these things are expensive. It'll work itself out. It's a terrible business model. And so I just knew that, man, if we can help somebody, one person turn their life around and get a staining business going. Yeah. And because that's the only, if I knew brain surgery, that's what I'd be teaching, but I don't.
Sure.
I know the stain business.
Yeah.
So if I can help them figure that out and maybe it means they get to get their wife to stay home from work so that they can raise their family and live the American dream, then it would win, and they'd probably buy their stain from us. Sure. And we'll make a darn good stain for them. And that's how we'll pay for it. And so, and all along the way, I will have this insatiable, yearning for knowledge. And so I'm going to constantly be getting around newer people. And as I learn something, I just throw it down. I got another one. Let's just throw it down. And that's the plan. And so far it's working. Our business is growing, and we're facing new challenges as our business grows.
Sure.
We went from 5 employees at the beginning of 2021 to ending 2021 with 18.
No, wow.
with a little bit of turnover. And our turnover was culture.
Yeah.
What happened is our culture changed, and our company, not me, made the people that didn't fit. They just left. And
That's interesting.
And so now the stuff that I need to learn and are learning, however to say that, is different. And so it's just different perspectives and different lessons. And so I think we can keep running this for a long time.
Well, and Caleb, let me back up a minute, because you had said it's probably not a good business model.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's only not a good business model if your main mission is to make money.
Mm-hmm.
I think if your main mission is to raise the industry, provide education to those that need it the most, and just ultimately provide opportunity, I think it's wildly successful.
Yeah, I think so. And every year it's scary. It's like, when you hire a really good person, or you get a chance to hire a good person, usually it's pretty scary because it's expensive.
Yeah.
And as this thing gets bigger and bigger, it's expensive and it's kind of scary. But I've got faith in that it'll work out, and it just keeps working out. And if it gets too darn big, we'll just start looking for donations or something.
Sure.
Right? We'll figure it out. So, so far so good, man. It's been a lot of fun, and I have learned so much from getting around folks like you that it's just been incredible.
Well, and I've learned just as much.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was getting ready to say that I appreciate you having me along for the ride.
Man, I think we've kind of done this together. I don't think it was very mutual.
It's been a lot of fun. It's also been very fulfilling, because we both hear the stories of, there's one story of a guy that was getting ready to be done, right? But then he happened to be in the area, and he stopped by, and he caught the fire again.
Yeah.
Right. And he talked to a few guys that had similar struggles, but overcame them. Mm-hmm. And then next thing you know, back in business, rehiring team members.
A new plan.
And it's a new plan and fully operational.
Yeah.
So that's the win.
Sometimes you gotta go down before you can go up, and that's important.
Or the guys that took time off of work, or their daily job, to come over to try to figure out, A, can I do it?
Yeah.
And B, how? How do I make this thing work? That to then watch them leave their daily jobs that they don't care for. They were only in it for the check. Right. Now they're into something that they're passionate about.
Yeah.
That's the win.
So here's a struggle that I've faced.
Okay.
And while doing this, we're telling everybody the dream of how great staining is as a business, right? Well, I've got guys that work for us that stain. And so how do we keep them? Because if we tell you, hey, you can go change your life by starting a staining business, and I got guys working for me in a staining business, what's keeping them from starting their own staining business? And so I've struggled with this, and I've said, well, you know what? How do you keep employees? I heard a saying about Nashville Fire Department. We got all these little small fire departments around Nashville. Nashville gets all the best guys. They leave all the other departments and go to Nashville. And I asked somebody, I said, why is that? He said, well, if you want to retain the best, you got to pay the best.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that makes sense. And then another thing that would hit me from time to time was you would see guys who make 20 grand a year, but they work for a county or a government, and they've got insurance.
Yeah.
And maybe their lawn mowing business or their fence business or something, they're like, oh, I know I could make $300,000 this year with my fence business, but man, I've got insurance at my day job.
Right.
And I'm like, well, what's keeping people there at that? And then, so obviously it's hard also to hire, because maybe the fence company down the road would pay you twice as much money as working as a maintenance guy for the school system, but you don't have the insurance. So how do we get employees and maintain them happily and treat them right and make them loyal to a small business? Because I think as small business owners, that's another challenge that we're facing.
Yeah.
So how do we retain good quality people and have a great culture? Well, you got to pay better. You got to have benefits. You got to have insurance. You got to have incentives. You got to have there's a lot of things you got to have. We're figuring that stuff out.
Sure.
We're having to figure it out. And I think a lot of people are figuring out. And I think so as I figure that out in my business, we've got to make our business so good that our people don't want to leave. Yeah. And I'm sure some of our folks are going to watch this, and I hope we're doing a good job at it.
Sure.
We're working for that. That's our goal. every time we go up another rung on the ladder, we find a new challenge in the business. At first, it was just, what kind of sprayer do we use?
Sure.
How do we be efficient in staining? To now, how do we keep and manage employees and keep them engaged and happy to where, because you hear stories about people who take pay cuts to go to a different job and they're happy. It's the best thing they've ever done. And so how do we create a culture like that so that the average small business guy in America, no matter if he's a whatever the business is, can compete with the Amazons and the the local police departments and the things, really the big box stores or the Fortune 500 companies to get the good people.
Yeah.
And so that's where we're at now. That's the next step,
And I think that's important to note is that there's always the next step, right? So I think there's this misconception that one day you make it. Right, one day you just show up and everything's done, and that's not actually the case. Right, is that there's always ever that next rung higher. That I feel like entrepreneurs or business owners in general, they have that draw to them. Right, they always see that next rung that they can climb up, and they're motivated to see what that is and see what they can figure out.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like the little mountain. You see the huge mountain and the person's looking up, and then there's the next level up and the clouds are hitting it, and you can or the iceberg. There's this much iceberg sticking out. The further you go, the more you can see. When you get over each little hill, you see, oh man, we still got a long way to go, and so that's Staining University. I think you'll probably see the name change and evolve over the years.
Sure.
But that's where it started, and I think, so what we've been able to do is we've been able to, as we go, we're able to get people from each step along the way to be there and kind of mentor other people in a group format. And then at night when we go out and talk or whatever, you get to sit around a table and have coffee with them or a beer or whatever, and you get to talk about those problems. And I've seen, the feedback is good. It's working.
To tie all this back in, like I say, I think what you've done is create the educational component that you wish you had, but also, just like you had said, in the evenings and around the coffee table, you're also building the network you wished you had, right? Just of resources.
Network of good friends, man.
That's right. And providing that to the industry, right? Like essentially that's what we're doing is we're each bringing our circle of trusted individuals and introducing them to everyone else, right? And I think we're seeing that in the fence and staining industry in general now, more of an opening of here's my tips, here's my tricks.
Yeah, so we're tied in with quite a few communities, like even the power wash community. I was talking to somebody that's in the home inspection space.
Okay.
And what across industries, what I am hearing is that industries that come together in collaboration are experiencing 35 to 40% faster growth than industries that are not collaborating, industries that are being stubborn, right? And so I'm seeing it. I've seen just the staining industry going from probably can claim to be the first guy on Facebook to really be doing live staining stuff. Probably was. I mean, that's definitely debatable.
Really good chance.
Yeah, really good chance of it. To now, like, there's a lot of people doing it. It's prevalent. There's always been people staining, but not even in our market. Nashville was pretty dead. Now, like, we get some stiff competition in our own backyard, and we've trained them. And
that's fantastic.
Yeah, and so, but what it does is it goes, all right, well, this year they're really going to be coming for us. So we're going to do this and this. We're going to add this on and this on. And so it just pushes us to be, so the worst case scenario is the question we get is, well, aren't you worried about training your competition? And I'm like, well, you don't want to be dumb. You don't want to teach everybody all the tricks and box yourself into a corner or paint yourself into a corner. But I don't see how we've done that, because we haven't, and because what we've found is we've found guys in our market that were staining before us. They said, oh, it's better now that after we've learned the way you do it or what you do or however, our job's better. And actually, I've found that having more competitors in our market that means there's more people learning about what we do. So it's like the market is actually growing.
Well, and you're probably raising the level of professionalism too.
The level of service is increasing.
I believe it's a Richard Branson quote that, the question is, what happens if you train your people and they leave?
Yeah.
The alternate question is, what happens if you don't train them and they stay?
Yeah.
Which would you prefer?
Sure.
Right.
It's every industry.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
But no, we like it. It's things are changing for positive, that's for sure.
Caleb, let me ask one last question. That is, how much of your success would you attribute to hard work and dedication, perseverance, and how much would you attribute to luck?
Well, I would call it 100% to both, because obviously I feel extremely blessed and lucky. Like, obviously when you have a wife and 4 children that love you, that's lucky, right?
Yeah.
Could have got hit by a bus on the way over here.
Sure.
But I'll tell you a story about perseverance to tell you what kind of person I am. Everybody's heard of Reba McEntire.
Yeah.
So she's got property there in Tennessee, and she had this huge fence. And they built this fence. It was miles of fence. And I wanted to paint the fence, because this was the reason I called the Doug Harrell guy I was telling you about, because I'm going to get that fence one day. I would call up Starstruck Entertainment. Hey, is Reba in the office today? And they're like, no, not talking to Reba. I did that. Would knock on the doors. I would leave brochures, and finally one day, 2 years into this deal, the gate was open and I got the job. I got the Reba job. And in fact, we stained it in 2016, and we actually painted it again this last year, 2021. And so, point being is, I have always been really hard-headed. Ask my wife. She would agree. But I would say that I have always been very persistent, and I don't need a pat on the back to know that I'm doing the right thing. And I don't, if you tell me no, it just does not. I can't hear it. I've got a really bad hearing problem. And so yeah, persistence, hard work for sure. I worked a lot harder when I was young, before, because it was like work all day and then do computer stuff all night, and then I've got to build a website and figure that, and so I put in a lot more hours before, and so now I'm learning to put in less hours and get more done.
Yeah.
That's the next challenge, right? But no, I feel like I've been very blessed. I feel like I've been very blessed, and I would say, yeah, I worked hard, but there's a lot of people who worked a lot harder. Feel probably a lot of luck involved here with this one.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Well, Caleb, thank you again for being so giving of your time. I really do appreciate it.
Love it.
Everybody, I'm Joe Everest. It's Caleb Roth, and we're reminding you that good fences make good neighbors. We'll see you next time.